Hello folks, and welcome back to this Fokker Dr1 refurbishment project. It's originally drawn up and built from a flare design, I believe, although it's not a flare kit. In the last video I covered this open structure, and off camera I've completed the job and covered the remainder of the structure with the dress lining. Covering sheeted areas is quite straightforward. You simply start in the middle and work out. Today's task is to cover this middle wing, and I thought I'd do a little video while I do that and take you through my thought process, what there is of it, in working with this material. So let's get started. Here I am checking that everything will fit in before I go ahead and cover it in this format. And it does. Obviously there's room for a spare wing there. I want to actually keep the wings together if I can, because it makes rigging a lot easier at the field. Now I know everything's going to fit, I will definitely press ahead. Well, now that I know everything fits into the car as I want, I'm giving this some Mod Podge, which is some sort of PVA glue, I'm guessing. I know that Gorilla Glue works just as well. Any white PVA glue, I'm sure would work, because it's not available in some parts of the world. You have to look for alternatives. This is why I actually went for this covering technique, because I don't have available the covering that you can get in the States, for example. I forget the name of it now. Which is an iron-on covering at a reasonable price. If I could, then I wouldn't be doing all of this, but needs must, and because I haven't got access to it, this is what I have to do. So I'll give all the edges a coat of the glue, and of course the weight saving in this is because if you use something like Oratex, it has the glue coating over the whole surface of the fabric, which is obviously adding weight. In the case of this application, it's only actually where you need it. There's no weight here, for example, is there? So I think it's quite favourable in terms of weight compared to commercial material. In fact, I have weighed it, and it weighs 75 or 70 grams per square metre. And from what I understand from the literature, Oratex, which to my knowledge is the only real commercially available fabric covering, iron-on fabric covering, weighs between 90 and 120 grams per square metre, because obviously it has the paint and the glue on, and the variation in the weight is due to the colour. Some colours cover better than others. Now I am actually going to do the ribs in this case, and I'm going to stretch and iron to them, and the reason for that is I'm hoping it'll reduce the sag between the ribs when I come to do the doping, because I don't want it to stick to the spars. Sometimes that happens, it's a real pain. So if I can stretch between each rib and fasten it down by applying the iron, I think that'll be an advantage. So that's all I do. Put it on, let it dry. You can leave it for days until you're ready to do it, as it happens. We'll have a coffee, let this dry, and then I'm going to come back and start it. Got free rein today, the missus has gone out, so I can do a video and chat to myself without feeling silly. Okay, leave that to sit, have my coffee, and then we'll come back and we'll actually start the process. As I hope you can see, I've cleared the decks a little bit. Well, I've basically thrown all the junk into a box. But what I've got here before I start is I've got a long steel rule, obviously for marking out. Crimping shears, they're a godsend. Unless you desperately need to get a straight edge, and there are some applications where you do. These are excellent when you're working with fabric because you don't get it running. It gives a nice clean cut. If it's me, as my son will attest, I'm terrible at losing things, so I've got lots of pencils. I've got a bog standard iron, nothing fancy, no temperature control. But through experience when working with this dress lining, I know that I have to set it basically at 3/4 temperature, which is higher than I would normally do. I would do halfway normally for using solar film or any plastic film, a little bit higher for something like Oratex or Solatex, and for this I tend to go higher again. So that's the iron. I have a gun handy, but I'm probably not going to use that very much at all. I try to avoid using it. It's going to be cut out in 2 panels. The join here is obviously internal to the fuselage, so that's not a big deal. I'm going to mark it out, basically cut a rectangle out, and then we'll start the process. Because of the scalloped edge, that's going to be a bit of fun. That'll be trimmed off later. I'll try and use a nice clean cut on the front leading edge and use that as my base point. So I'll mark this out. The biggest point is here. And that's roughly halfway, allowing an overlap. I'll trim this out and then we'll actually fire the iron up and start applying the covering. While I'm waiting for the iron to heat up, this is going to be the strategy. I've obviously got the weave set up in line with the actual wing itself. I'm going to tack along this edge first, and that will give me an anchor to be able to pull on the rest of the fabric. I'll tack the other end and then come to the middle and then basically break it down into halves as I go along. I think that may be warm enough. I've got it just on an old rag here. It's a lot less hassle than trying to mess around with the stand. And you'll notice that I don't use a shoe for the iron. I think you get more control, or you get more of a feel of what you're doing when you work without a shoe. So the first thing is, am I happy with that? If I do that, it'll mean less trimming. Okay, here it goes. And all I'm doing here is reactivating the Mod Podge by applying heat. And as I say, other glues will work probably just as well if you can't get Mod Podge. Gorilla Glue works, I've tried that. So there we have the tension, that's glued on now. I'm just going to spot it there and there. I'm keeping a little bit of tension on this cloth. There we go. And I'll do it on this side because there's less to hold. Make sure it's firmly anchored. And then pull on this side. In the middle between, in fact, we'll iron this on to here a bit. Now notice, when you're working on a solid surface, the way I like to do it is work from the centre and push out. So I'm working from the open frame and pushing in. And that's perfectly bound there now. Put a bit of tension on it this way. You want to take as many of any wrinkles out in this stage before you actually do any shrinking at all. That's my philosophy anyway. The more you can get it taut now, the less you have to rely on the heat of the gun to take out wrinkles, but also the dope itself. I'll take it there, put a bit of tension on here. And as you can see, that's all there is to it really. It's not a... Now what I'm going to do is iron to the capping strips, and I hope that helps reduce the sag that can occur when you're doping. I've got a nice taut finish there, and I haven't applied any heat to here yet, and I haven't added any shrinking dope. Now I understand shrinking dope can be an issue in certain parts of the world. You can't get it, or it can't be transported in by aircraft, which is fairly understandable. It's a very flammable substance. The purpose of the dope, the shrinking dope obviously adds to the tautness, but I hope you can see that's fairly taut as it is. The addition of the dope is simply to close up the weave. And although I haven't done it myself, I'm sure you could do the same with a varnish. It's probably something worth experimenting with on a scrap piece of wood, or scrap open frame, or an old battered wing. Try it out and see what happens. That's how I discovered that I like using this. Now, I think you can see there, this is quite ragged, and what I'll do is I'm going to dope this area and round all the edges to seal them on, and once that's doped, I'll run a razor along here and I'll pull off a nice clean edge. So I'm not too worried that we've got a ragged finish here. And it doesn't really matter anyway because it's underneath, but if I know it's there, isn't it? So that's the first part of the process, and I hope you can see that we've got a nice taut finish. That's without any shrinkage yet. Now, when it comes to the ends, it's always a good idea to leave a generous amount on the end, because that gives you something to pull onto and pull under like this. Now what I do is I'll start at the high point and just get it tacked. That's tacked. Now I've got to pull it round here next. It's awkward the way I'm working. I hope you can see this. There we go. Then I'll pull this corner down. That's it attached. Now, what I'll do, I'll trim all of this off and start overlapping it, and then I'll show you what the next part of the job is. I might show you a little bit of how I'm going to deal with these scallops here. Let's just pause it and crack on. This is trimmed and ready to push over. Now what I'll do is I'll iron this down, and then I'm going to apply another coat of Mod Podge over the fabric, because obviously when the next upper level covering is done, it needs to have Mod Podge to be activated for it to stick down. So what I'll do is I'll iron this over, and I'll repeat this all the way around the whole frame, the wing, and then I'll give this a coat of Mod Podge, let it dry, ready for the upper layer. And when both layers are finally done, I seal all the edges with a fairly strong dope mix. So that's on. Now when it comes to this rear scalloped area, I'm going to cut it as a straight line all the way, and then I'm going to nick, probably using a brand new blade, and feather it out so that I can fold those over. Now when the whole thing's done and the edges have been ironed on, what I'll do is I'll give it probably up 3 coats of dope, and in between each dried layer of dope I'll give it a light sand down with a nail file, and then apply another coat of dope, and that way you take away all the rough edges. It works really well. So I'll cut that straight, perhaps show you how I'm going to feather it, and then we'll push on. So I've trimmed off some of the excess. I'm just going to put a cut here at the peak of each of the scallops to begin with. And then I'll put some, let's call them sunbeams, like this. And I'm going to iron them in, and then I'll dope the inside, and when the dope's dried you get a nice crisp edge to cut off with a new blade. So I'll show you with this one, and then obviously I'll repeat all the way along. So simply starting at the middle, I'm feathering them in, and those little petals that are sticking up, can you see them? I hope you can, yeah. Those petals that are sticking up, once they've been doped, they'll trim off nice and neat. And I'll do that all the way along, and then I'll show you what it looks like once the edges have been doped. That's the lower panel covered, and what I'm going to do is, first of all, I'll apply some Mod Podge to the leading edge for the overlap, wherever the fabric is, because obviously the next layer needs something to stick to. So I'm going to apply that quite generously to fill all the pores. Now, it doesn't really matter if you're using Mod Podge which one you get. This happens to be the gloss one. You can get it in matte and satin, and I think it's used as a sort of glaze as well. I use it a lot in model railwaying, which is something I've sort of stopped doing for the moment, but I'm sure it's something I'll go back to. I have a couple of layouts, one of which I've exhibited on the circuit, so to speak. And Mod Podge is really handy when it comes to doing the sealant work. That's how I'm used to it and I know about it. But what I was saying is the gloss one is really handy because you can see where you've gone with it. So, generous application around the edge. And a little way, not massively so, but a little way under there, because I'll try and trim this one a little neater because it's the final finish. I'll go all the way around with that. this part I'm going to do with quite a strong dope. I'll come back and show you that when we're ready to trim that off, and I'll show you how it works. Coffee break over. This has had time to set, and basically with a sharp blade you simply trim off the excess, and you get a nice clean cut, cutting through the material with a small amount of the dope on it. I think you get the idea. Take this one off. And you can see there, I hope, you're getting a nice smooth finish ready for the next layer. So I'll carry on, do that all the way around, and then we'll apply the top coat. When it comes to covering the upper surface, it is possible to do this in one piece and stretch it over the tip because there's quite a lot of give in the material, but I must admit that I prefer to do this as a separate panel. So what I'm going to do is iron this on. Got it glued there, it's taken. And then once this is attached, I'll trim off the surplus, reapply the Mod Podge to the top, and we'll have a join here with the main panel. I think this makes for a neater finish, actually, to be quite honest with you. Hello, Sooty, you coming? And there we go. That's that end piece on. I'll tuck it round, dope the surface, trim the surplus off, and then we're ready to do the main panel. Now that the tip's been added on, it's possible to get a nice neat join with the upper surface. But to do that, I want to get this in place. And the crimped edge gives a nice finish to it. Almost there. There we go. Now it's a case of keeping the tension on. So I'll establish an anchor point this side, and then just repeat what I did before. There you go. I'll carry on and then we'll come back when it's done. We only have the centre section to do. I contemplated leaving it actually because it's plywood, and I believe that the DR1 had some sort of plating over this area, but I'm going to cover it anyway, to hell with it. And to get the shape, or sort of rough shape, I'm going to produce a template. I'm just rubbing this along the edge to get the approximate shape. Doesn't have to be the exact shape, the approximate will do. And then I'll cut that out of the dress lining. Let's see how it goes, how close it is. Needs more here, but that'll give me a rough shape so that it's easier to manhandle when I come to iron it on. Last section to do then, here we go. When I'm working on the sheeted areas, I find it's best to start at the middle and work out. So I'll apply some heat at the crest of the fuselage part here. Make sure that's properly adhered to the surface, and then just work down. And I'm going to, once I've got this stuck down, I'm going to use some dope to finalise it. Bind them there nicely. And I'll do it in the centre at the back. And then before this, the cockpit area is cut out, I'll dope the whole lot, and that'll make for a nice clean cut once the dope has set. That's going on nicely, I'm pleased with that. Working out from the centre and down. And if I feel it needs stretching, I can pull on it a little bit. There we go. It's going nicely. I'm going to make a little relief cut. Am I? No, I don't think I need it actually. I thought I might need one, but we're nearly there. I'm really happy with that, that's gone well. So what I'll do is I'll trim the excess at the ends here, and I'm going to do up the whole thing so it's nice and bonded to it, and then I can cut round this area once it's dried. Time to stick some dope on. I think that'll have gone off enough now to be able to trim the cockpit area out. Very satisfying, isn't it? Right, I'm finding it so. And let's trim off this excess. Nice and neat. I'll finish off the rest and then we'll see what it looks like. And there you have it. I couldn't resist putting the 2 wings on. One more to go. It suddenly becomes very big once you add those on. But there you have it. Really pleased with that. Hope you've enjoyed the journey. If you have, give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't yet subscribed and you've just stumbled on this site, why not subscribe and see how the rest of the project comes along with many other adventures. Take care now.